Julia Ruth does not like Divarni. She's made it very clear. Julia Ruth is staying in this marriage because she'd really love 15 minutes of fame. She is making an absolute mockery of the experiment because most of us have come here for love.
I'm so sorry about my late review, but I had training today, so I'm running a bit late. Anyway, I'm here for Keye's mic drop moment because at the end of the day, Julia Ruth needed to be called out, and for him to say, "I'm not here for fame," she is here for fame. I've got a 6-figure salary. I came here for a husband. I got my husband, and I'm out. So I don't need the influencer opportunities that come with this. And it's like, oh my God, I wonder how Julia Ruth feels now seeing everything that Keye said behind her back, because it seems they've been on a press tour this week, so I can't wait for that. And then I am here for Lee calling out Julia Ruth. And Julia Ruth, the audacity for her to say, "You better be careful." I didn't like the way she said it. It was threatening, in my opinion. I know that's a big word, but in my opinion, the way she said it, I didn't like it. It was as though she's saying to her, "Open your mouth and say whatever you want, but I'm coming back at you with something else," which makes me question, what did she say to Divarni that pacified him? It can't be the cat. The cat can't be that good that he would keep quiet and allow people to speak on his behalf, because you could see he agreed with everything, but he didn't want to be the voice behind whatever was being said. Anyway, hey there, thanks for stopping by. It's your girl Valerie. Welcome to my channel. If you're new here, don't forget to subscribe, click the like button, turn on the notification bell for when I upload new videos, and definitely leave a comment. In this episode, I'll be reviewing Married at First Sight UK, Season 10, Episode 20. So you have all the couples just hanging around in their apartments, getting ready for the dinner party. Everybody seems to be in a very good space. Outside of Maeve, Maeve is not happy because obviously her husband is not there. He went, home and he needed personal space. And now she is upset that, yes, he needs personal space, but why is he not communicating with me? And it's like, I don't think this is the moment for you to make this about yourself, Maeve. This man is grieving. We all grieve differently. Allow him the space and the opportunity to grieve, and then you can resolve your issues afterwards. I feel like she's doing all this and she's, making such a big deal because she knows that she upset him before he left. You have the couples, you have Lee and Leah, Bailey and Rebecca, sort of having conversations about the same thing. The fact that Divarni has been played by Julia Ruth. Julia Ruth has lied to everyone. She's disrespected this man. She's been saying some of the most horrible things about him behind his back, and nobody paid any attention to it because we were all focused on Sarah. Now that Sarah's left, now the truth is coming out. So I can't wait to see what happens with that, because that's going to be messy when they get to the dinner party. Lee is saying she is Team Divarni. I'm Team Divarni in this because I think Julia Ruth went way too far left. Yes, she's there for the opportunity, but she could have got the opportunity without being sort of malicious or vindictive towards somebody else. Ashley and Grace, had this conversation that I found very awkward because they were saying, we're not going to say anything about the fight that we had. We're in a good space. We've forgiven each other. We're moving on. Let's try and put that in the past and let's not say anything because we are sort of making the efforts to change. So let's continue with that. On his part, Ashley is saying he's changed a lot about himself and he cannot continue to change anymore because he's going to end up not recognizing himself, which makes sense because he's doing all the changing. We haven't yet heard Grace say she's changing anything or any of her values or beliefs that she came into the experiment. It seems she's more focused on what she came in as, and he is the one who's making the constant changes. Joe and Maeve then met in what looked like a cafe, and I didn't get it. I'm going to say this. I said this last week, I think, or after the commitment ceremony, that the experts made a mistake by telling Maeve that she needs to be open and honest with her feelings and feel what she wants to feel at the moment, because Maeve lacks the ability to regulate herself when she's upset. She goes from 0 to 100, and this man is now seeing it again. And I think he's realized that this wasn't a one-off. This is who she is, and he's now backing down. And Maeve refuses to say exactly what happened during their argument because they sit down for a conversation. She's upset because she feels like, he is not been communicating with her. She asks him, "Are you going to the dinner party with me?" He said he can't go because his granddad is being buried the next day, so he needs to go and be with his family. I totally agree. I'm surprised that he stayed in the experiment. He said he's tired of arguing, and he's worried about how they'll cope in the real world because she goes from 0 to 100. She was sort of very defensive in that. And it's like, you have to own it. Watch yourself, how you behaved on the honeymoon when he made the very mild comment that you reacted to. And then you reacted about the clothing that he's asking you to wear something. How do you think he feels? How do you think he feels? I feel like he's backing down because he's realized she's too much. And sadly, as much as Maeve is saying that all her partners have left, this might be the reason why they're leaving. She might need to go home and do some work on herself and how to regulate herself when she's upset. You then have all the parties come to the dinner party. Everybody's excited. The experts are excited for the dinner party. And it's like, oh, it's about to go down. First up is Bailey and Rebecca. They come in. They're very happy. They're in a very good space. Obviously, they've overcome the issue that they had after the love-hate challenge. They're followed in by Lee and Leah, and they sort of have a conversation about their disagreement after the love-hate challenge. And so they're in a good space. Lee and Leah are saying, we are in a good space. We are very happy. We've managed to sort of turn a corner because they had the issue whereby Lee was struggling to sort of open up and allow herself to let her partner step in. And then you have Grace and Ashley. They come in next. And they were very awkward, very, very awkward, to the extent that people ended up asking them what's going on. And they sort of danced around the truth of what happened. Grace is the problem in that couple. She doesn't realize it, but I think watching herself, she's going to realize that there are a lot of things that she needs to work on. She firstly needs to change her group of friends because they're not doing her any favors. And then she needs to work on some of her beliefs. Because she was saying, Ashley's a joke, some of them are inappropriate. And it's like, as much as they're inappropriate, your reaction to them at times is also inappropriate. Yes, you're both point scoring in the sense that you can only see where you're aggrieved. You can't see the other person's side. But I think Ashley has ended up now having to go into defensive mode because no matter what he does, she has to find a loophole to see how she can say she's been offended by that. Anyway, they followed in by Maeve. Maeve comes in on her own, and she's really sad because she's coming on her own. And Ashley sort of backed into a corner because he had a conversation with Joe. He knows what Joe is upset about, but he is saying to production, I'm not going to break his confidence by telling, Maeve what's happened or telling Grace what's happened, because then that puts Joe in a corner whereby he can't trust anyone. So I can't do that. And I think given the challenges that Joe has faced, kudos to Ashley for maintaining that stance that I'm not going to say anything. You had people like Grace saying, okay, why doesn't Joe just be honest if he doesn't want to be with you? Why doesn't he tell you? Because it sounds like he is dragging you along so that, you can turn around and say you don't want to be with him. And it's like, I think this man is fed up. I really do. I think he's fed up of all the drama and he's just wanting to move on. April and Leah were next to come in, and they seem to be in a good space because obviously their problem is there's no depth to their connection. So I love the fact that you had the girls sit down for a conversation. You had Leah sort of say to April, the problem is I don't think this man can stimulate you enough mentally. And it's like, maybe she should have asked for someone who's highly intelligent, as I've said before. But the experts were saying that when they met with this guy, Leo, he was very charming, he was very out there. So they're surprised that suddenly he's being called very shallow. They don't understand it. And it's like, oh, it's about to go down. And then finally, because you had everyone start to talk about Julia Ruth and Divarni, and you had, Lee telling everyone that, we were all dragging Divarni through the mud, saying he's not doing enough to save his relationship, only to find out that he has been doing enough. It's just his wife has been playing all of us and not telling us all the truth, that this man has been trying his level best to make sure that their relationship works. She is the one who's not happy with their couple. And this is why she's busy making excuses and coming up with porkies about what he's doing and what he's not doing. In the sprinter van, you have Julia Ruth and Divarni. And Julia Ruth is almost sitting on Divarni's lap. She's almost sitting on Divarni's lap. You could tell that she's had conversations with him and has really wound him up to an extent that it's just a matter of, yes, dear, no, dear, oh, yes, dear, whatever you want. the fact that they made a conscious effort to hold hands, and Julia Ruth was the one to initiate the hand holding. It's like, oh, okay. And people were sort of questioning whether they were going to come in together or separately. So when Divarni and Julia Ruth walked in, you had people sort of questioning that we're surprised you're together. You said there was no attraction. You criticized him very badly. And Julia Ruth was saying, well, I was confused in my head. I was trying to go with my type. And this is why I was saying there's no attraction. But, we're in a very good space. We've really worked hard. And everyone was calling it and saying they're lying. They're lying. They really are sort of trying to keep up appearances. Julia Ruth was then complaining that people need to mind their own business and focus on their relationships and stay out of her relationship. And it's like, oh, I don't think so. I really don't think so. So in the middle of all that drama, we had Keye and Davide walk in. They were in a very good space. They were very happy. And they were both, at peace. You then had the guys call Divarni to say, Divarni, you need to come here. And he had to ask Julia Ruth for permission, like he's in school. Please, do you mind if I go and speak to the guys? And it's like, what did she say to him? How is she controlling this man? What exactly did she say that makes him so afraid of her and have to ask her for permission to do any single thing? Anyway, he went over to sit with the guys, and you had, Leah follow him, because Leah said she's Team Divarni. So she went there and she was asking, I thought she said there was no future. She said there was no attraction. What happened? Only for Divarni to turn around and say, oh, she threw the cat at me yesterday. We've made up. We're in a good space. And Ashley was saying, you can't ignore this. You can't ignore everything that she said and say that the two of you are in a good space. And it's like, you could tell as people were talking to him, he was fighting a losing battle, because he's trying to sort of go by what Julia Ruth has said to him, or the script that Julia Ruth has written for him, but he's also trying to look at things realistically for everybody's point of view, because he started asking, what do you mean she said there'll never be an attraction? And she was told, and he was told, all the girls know this. Everybody knows. Julia Ruth has already said this to everyone. It was really sad. I really wish the experts had come out of wherever they were and pulled the plug and said, okay, fine, the two of you go home. I hope they send them home just like they broke up that couple, Shana and that guy last season. I hope they do the same. Next, we had Reese and Leisha walk in. They said they've had a better week. They're continuing to move on. On his part, Reese feels like, Leisha is moving too fast. And it's like, we all know, buddy. They're followed in by Abigail and John. Abigail and John are the poster children for a happy couple. They're in a very good space. They say they complement each other very well, and they seem to be doing amazingly well. Nellie and Stephen are very happy. They're in a very good space, and they feel like this was a better week for them. Amazing. Julia Ruth then has a conversation with Davide, because Davide is saying, you said, he wasn't, you weren't attracted to him. And she said, yes, I said he wasn't my type, but I've been having this battle with myself whereby I've been more focused on my type, but things are in a better space. Because Davide felt very aggrieved, because he asked her, why weren't you honest with me? We've had conversations off camera, away from everyone, and you haven't even had the audacity to tell me the truth. Keye, on his part, I love it, was sitting right behind Julia Ruth and was making faces and laughing, because to him, he couldn't understand why she was playing victim. The audacity for her to bring out false tears on cue and start crying. It's like, oh my God, she thinks she's on stage and she's performing for someone else. I didn't like that. Anyway, all the couples then went to the dining area for their dinner. Everyone was excited. And Julia Ruth started making sarcastic remarks. The comments she made about Leah's eyebrows, that's not her business. That's not it. That is not it. I know she's since put out a statement on her social media. If I were Julia Ruth, I would keep quiet and just ride the storm quietly and not feel the need to justify myself, because she's never going to pacify people once the pitchforks are out. I said this before and I'll say it again, and she's not doing herself any favors with every single episode that's airing. I can't wait to see what happens. Anyway, you had Leah then stand up and say she's in a good space in a couple, and she's hoping that people can be open and honest and give open and honest opinions. And it's like, oh, it's about to go down. Then you had Julia Ruth continue to make these sarcastic remarks. And she said, I need to have a conversation with Leah because Lee is sort of interfering in a place where she shouldn't be. And for her to say we want to talk outside, I feel like she wanted to intimidate and bully Lee away from everybody else and knew that if she had a conversation in front of everybody else, everybody would call her out. For her to turn around and say, you need to watch what you're saying because you've run your mouth already, sort of intimidating her into saying that, well, if you continue opening your mouth and sort of criticizing my relationship, I'm coming after you. That's not a good look. That really is not a good look. And I don't know what gave Julia Ruth the audacity to think she was doing an amazing job. She said, you should have spoken to me. You shouldn't have spoken to me in front of the group. You could have pulled me aside. They don't have that type of relationship. They don't. Everybody was fighting her battle for her, not realizing that she was the snake in the grass. And so for Julia Ruth to try and turn it around and say, oh, you are in a friendship couple. Why have things suddenly turned around for you? You're pretending that you're in a good place. You're not. And Lee said to her, you've been saying all these bad things about Divarni, and suddenly things have changed. You're in a good space. Make it make sense. Julia Ruth, sadly, people would have been okay with her dragging her partner through the mud. Now that she's coming after Lee, this is not going to end well. This is not going to end well at all. And so for them to decide to leave it at this space whereby they would never understand each other, and then for Julia Ruth to come and steal a seat beside Davide over, someone who was speaking to her doesn't make sense. This is something that she's going to regret. Her performance on this show is something she's not going to live by, because the UK viewers are not as forgiving as viewers in other countries. So she's playing with fire, and hopefully she's got the fire extinguisher to put it out, because this is not going to end well. For her to complain bitterly to Davide, to say that she's trying to sort of take the attention away from her friendship couple, so she's making up things about me and my couple. Davide could see through that. You could see through that. And so I love that, he just said, she's trying to play things up and trying to make a big deal out of nothing. So you then had, Keye. Keye was upset. Keye was upset because he said, this is a fake relationship. If anyone here believes Julia Ruth and Divarni are in a real couple, raise your hand. And no one raised their hands. Nobody raised their hands because they all knew that Julia Ruth is playing up. And for Keye to say, I don't want to talk about anything. And what I found interesting was Julia Ruth had a lot of smoke for Lee, but she was begging, Keye to come and sit down. And it's like, so you only have smoke for one person, but the other person you don't have smoke for. I feel like the only reason she knew that she couldn't have smoke for Keye is she was worried about the LGBTQ community, that if she went after him, they would come after her with pitchforks. Whereas the whatever backlash she had for going after Leah, she could ride that wave and get away with it. And so I thought it was a bad look. I really thought it was terrible. Everybody in the room was saying Julia Ruth is playing games. They all know that she doesn't like this man. She's already said she doesn't like this man. She'll never like this man. Everybody told Divarni, and it's now up to Divarni to sort of take it for what it is. Anyway, the honesty box came out. First up was Lee and Leah. The card read by Leah was, are you ready to take intimacy to the next level? You had Lee say yes, without even blinking or saying anything. Next up was Lee. Lee asked who is the most honest and the least honest couple here. She said the most honest is Rebecca and Bailey. The least honest is Julia Ruth and Divarni. And she said everybody knows this, and everybody agreed with it. And Julia Ruth, there was nothing she could do. As much as she was making these snarky remarks under her breath, there was nothing she could do, because that was the truth. Julia Ruth and Divarni. Julia Ruth asked, do you believe I'm attracted to you? And Divarni had to say, I don't think so. I don't think so. And Julia Ruth was taken aback, because I think she expected him to say, yes, you are, to back up whatever nonsense she was trying to preach. For him to say, I don't think so, I think it's something that she wasn't expecting. And then you had Divarni ask her, have you been emotionally or physically attracted to another husband in the experiment? And she turned around immediately and said, Steve. Steve wasn't impressed. The facial expression he made was that of disgust. That of disgust. He couldn't stand Julia Ruth, and he couldn't understand why she was involving him in it. I love that you had Nellie ask her husband that, is there anything there? And he said, no, we've never had any conversations. I've never entertained anything with her. And the way he was sort of making this facial expression, you could tell he was disgusted by it. You could tell whether they're having something now, I don't know. But at that point, the facial expression he made was so off-putting. And it's like, oh my God, I feel embarrassed. The second-hand embarrassment I have for this woman is shocking. Then you had this conversation between Maeve, Ashley, and Grace. Grace was asking, how do you feel? You had Maeve sort of saying she's very upset because she doesn't understand why this man is not communicating with her. And it's like, maybe it's not the time for him to be communicating with you. Maybe he's dealing with his own family drama first. You are not number one priority in his head at the moment. For Grace to say, oh, I think he's just dragging you along and hoping that you break up with him. And it's like, when you see Ashley, he understands what's going on. Grace is just giving opinions, but she doesn't understand what's going on. And I wish she could keep her opinions to herself. You then had, at one point, Maeve left the room. She was being consoled by Keye and Grace. And it's like, I wish she was honest with her friends, because she is no better than what is happening with Julia Ruth, because she is being horrible to her husband and then pretending like she doesn't know what's happened. So I can't wait to see what happens with that drama. Anyway, thanks guys for watching. Please don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe. Click on the link in my video to watch my review from episode 19. Bye everyone.